Hey, it's you, man, from KC95 here. Good evening and welcome to Toasted Tavern. Your host, Scott Tobben, and the man called Wags are ready to bring you the night in sports. So pull up a stool, grab a drink, and let's get toasted.
That's right. Do not adjust your television sets. Do not adjust the radio dial. You are hearing the voices of Scott and Wags tonight. The Toasted Tavern is back. Yes, we were on a bit of a hiatus, but we are ready to start rolling again with all the great sports news in the area. With that Midwest bias, forget the East, forget the West. The Midwest is where it's at. And as I said earlier, Scott Tobben joining me, the man called Wags, for tonight's episode. Scott, man, it has been a while, but you're looking good. And I know you're anxious to start talking some sports again.
You were looking well yourself there, my friend. And how nice was it to hear the sounds of Jeremy Boyer on the organ and our great friend John Hewlett's voice bringing us in. And I didn't realize how much I'd missed those sounds until that hit just a minute ago. But it's good to be back, Wags. I missed you, buddy.
Oh, I missed you as well. I mean, we would chat back and forth, through messages and stuff like that. We still do our weekly football picks and all that. So we still have some interaction. But to be able to actually sit down, converse sort of face-to-face. I mean, we're still through computers, but being able to chat face-to-face about all the stuff that's going on in sports and it is really, really nice. I know you've started a new job, getting yourself a little bit deeper in with the Cardinals. I've gotten a chance to continue to study my career and all of that stuff, and other personal things have happened, which is really, really good. We don't need to get into that right now, but it's nice to get back because there's a lot of news going on. But dude, first off, how's the job going? I know we didn't get a chance to really talk about it on air before you started.
It's good. It's good. We're in a little bit of a break right now for the winter, the holidays. We get some time off. The office shuts down for a couple of weeks and things kind of mellow out for a lot of people. But involved with the Cardinals, doing some stuff there and working with some front office stuff, which is fun, and going to be really involved after the first of the year as we head towards the winter warm up and doing all of those things and start eyeing spring training. So baseball's right around the corner, man. It seems like it just ended almost, although it's been 2 months now. But it's right around the corner, and hot stove is picked up. And hey, the Cardinals went and spent some money. I don't know if you heard that or not, but we got a new catcher in St. Louis, not named Molina. How weird is that going to be?
That is going to be absolutely crazy. But, at least they're letting us kind of ease out of Molina by bringing in a guy that Molina kind of, I wouldn't say handpicked, but definitely used his influence to maybe usher him along a little bit more. And then, yes, we are talking about the newest Cardinal, Wilson with 2 L's, Contreras, who signed a 5-year deal with the Cardinals for $87.5 million, a $17.5 million AAV, which we'll get into the contract breakdown in just a second. But somehow or another, John Mozeliak pulled a rabbit out of his hat with the way he was able to negotiate that contract. But Contreras signed with the Cardinals because of Molina's ushering. And if you didn't read the story in the interview that he gave, that moment when Albert hit 695 at Busch and the Cubs were there, that was the kind of the moment where Contreras kind of was like, yeah, that's where I want to be. And that's weird hearing that from a guy that was playing with a rival, a local rival, and kind of an important game too. To have that kind of thought process is something you don't hear a whole lot.
No, and as somebody who was there that day, it was Labor Day. It was the bottom of the 8th inning. They pinch hit with Albert. He comes up. They leave the left-hander in. They actually had a mound visit to discuss whether they were going to leave him in or not. They leave him in, and Albert delivered. And, it was magical that day. I mean, the place went crazy. Albert did the Superman thing for the first time as he passed the dugout going down first base. And, I'm sure for all of those Cubs, like Wilson Contreras, like you said that was the moment that he knew he wanted to be a Cardinal. I'm sure for all of those guys to see that place go absolutely nuts because it had been pretty quiet that day because the offense had been stagnant. They hadn't done a whole lot. And Albert came in and, as he did so many times down the stretch, was the savior in that game. And, I'm sure that was a moment where you're like, holy cow, I'd love to experience that, to see, almost 50,000 people just going out of their minds as it was that day. I mean, it was so loud. That place was shaking on Labor Day that afternoon. And it's going to be cool, man. And, Wilson Contreras definitely got off on the right foot with his press conference on Friday. He said all the right things, talked about how Yachty was his hero and his inspiration and his role model. And, he couldn't be Yadi or Molina. He could only be Wilson Contreras, but he wanted to carry on in Yadi's legacy as much as he could. And I mean, if you're going to get Cardinal fans behind you, there's no better way than to say Yadi's my favorite, and I want to do everything I can to make Yadi proud of me. So he definitely won over a lot of Cardinal fans on Friday for sure.
Yeah, and I think he had an easier time of doing that because I think a lot of Cardinals fans actually kind of did want him to come to St. Louis. I mean, there were the other options, the trade with the A's for Sean Murphy, which the deal that the A's got from Atlanta, wildly different than the one that they wanted from the Cardinals. That's a whole nother story. Obviously you had the potential to trade with Toronto as well for a catcher. But I think when they went into the winter meetings, fans thought and were hoping that Contreras was the guy that was going to be the final piece to that winter meetings. Now, obviously they want more. They want some pitching. They want, an outfielder, that sort of stuff. And we'll get into what's next for the Cardinals here in just a bit. But Contreras was the guy people wanted. And it's not necessarily because of his defense. It's about his offense. He's a guy that is going to bring more of a thump to that catching position than Molina has the last couple of years. And you can't fault Molina for that. He was getting older. He's spent so much time behind the plate. That was a guy that had a very beat up body. Totally understandable. But you're going to get some more offensive firepower from that catching position. It's going to move him up probably into about the 5 spot in the lineup, and putting him behind, Arenado and Goldschmidt and all those guys only going to make his averages go up as well. And he's been solid. He's in 7 seasons. He's slashed a 256, 349, 459, 117 home runs, 365 RBIs in his career. And, last year, probably was a bit of a down year, just 55 runs driven in, but you look at that Cubs offense and really who is he going to be driving in anyway? So getting him into a lineup that should hopefully put players on base ahead of him should get those numbers right back up. The one thing you have to look at though is those power numbers, because Busch Stadium, is definitely a pitcher's ballpark. So, is he going to be able to continue to power hit in Busch Stadium, or is he going to really kind of have to focus on that average?
I think he'll still be a power hitter. Is he going to become more of a doubles hitter potentially than a home run? Maybe he doesn't. I think he can still be around a 20 home run hitter. I don't see him hitting 25, 26, 27 in Busch Stadium. But maybe you offset that. Maybe he's a 20 homer, 35 double guy, hitting in the – and, if he can do that, if he hits 250, 260, somewhere in that range, gives you that 20 home run, 30, 35 double – knocks home somewhere between 65 and 80 RBIs, let's say. I think that's what they're really looking for. And, he does fill a huge hole that the Cardinals have had, because they've been looking for that number 5 hitter for a couple of years now. And it does a bunch of things, because, you kind of solidify that. You say, okay, now you've got Goldie, Arenado, Contreras, 3, 4, 5. And then that frees Tyler O'Neill up a little bit, because now there's not that pressure of, hey, you have to be our 5 hitter. He can be your 3 hitter or your 2 hitter or whatever you want to do, or 6, and move him around. And you have different options with guys, and hopefully they're not done. Hopefully there's still maybe another move from outside the organization to add to this lineup too. But you've got a lot of guys, everybody's excited about Jordan Walker. We'll see at some point next year, we're going to see him in this lineup, you would think. Hopefully Dylan Carlson bounces back. There's a lot of guys, how does this outfield play out? But so there's still a lot of questions about the lineup, but hopefully you've now solidified that 3, 4, 5 in the middle of that lineup.
Yeah, I think you have. And you speak about the fact that there could still be potential stuff outside of the organization that they do. And the main reason that they can do that is because of the way that the contract breaks down. I mean, you're talking, an $87.5 million contract, $17.5 million AAV, but this year he's only going to be making $10 million, which kind of allows you to have some extra cash to possibly go out and make another signing. Maybe not the high-end shortstop that you were looking at. Obviously, Trey Turner and Xander Bogaerts are both signed, but you still got Carlos Correa out there. You still got Dansby Swanson out there as well. Both those guys probably not coming to St. Louis. The Twins are still going hard after Correa. Looks like the Giants and Yankees are both, mainly the Giants are trying to get Swanson in there as well. But it does jump up to $18 million after that for the next 3 years, then 18.5, and then a club option after that. Also a full no trade clause for the first, 3-4 years of the contract, and then a 10-team no trade clause after that. So you have to look at that and say, man, Mozeliak did a really good job in negotiating this contract, and mainly because they went to that 5th year, and that's what Contreras was looking for. He was looking for that 5th year because it was down to the Cardinals and the Astros essentially for his services, and they got the terms they wanted, but they still wanted that 5th year, and the Cardinals eventually went to that. And I think that's kind of the reason why you see just that $10 million contract for this year before it jumps up.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll be totally honest. I was one of those people that wasn't all that excited about Wilson Contreras. I was way more on the Sean Murphy bandwagon a week ago. But I'm excited about Contreras. I think he is going to be a solid bat. The thing with Murphy was just the fact that he is a more established defensive player than Contreras is. Although Contreras gets kind of a rough deal there because he hasn't caught as much lately. The Cubs used him as a DH a little bit more. But we know Wilson Contreras has one of the strongest arms in baseball. He has since he came up. He's been a deadly thrower. So that's definitely not going to be something the Cardinals are lacking. And then again, you go back to his press conference, and he basically said, hey, I know that I need to improve as a catcher defensively, pitch framing, some of those things, calling a game, and I'm prepared to come in here and work hard and improve that part of my game. And so again, for people who are kind of iffy on whether or not he was the right answer, he said all the right things to make you think he is going to be the perfect fit. And the other thing that he brings that you have to love is he's got that same fire that Yachty had. He wants to win. He's competitive. He's gonna get right in somebody's face. He's not afraid to ruffle feathers on the opposing team or in his clubhouse. And we all know that Yachty was not afraid to do that. So, the fact that you still have that in your clubhouse too, which is good because, let's be quite honest, the Cardinals have a lot of choir boys in their clubhouse. You don't have a whole lot of guys on this team that are going to go ruffle somebody's feathers. I mean, we all know that Nolan's not afraid to get in somebody's face if the moment comes. And Goldie will too, but they're not those really fiery, rah-rah guys all the time. They're kind of, Nolan a little bit more than Goldie. Goldie's kind of laid back, but then will attack when he has to, kind of a deal. Contreras is going to be that guy that's kind of in everybody's face and kind of chirping all the time.
I'd love to see the Flaherty-Contreras duo. That's going to be the one that I look at and go, man, if you want to see, I'm not going to compare him to Bob Gibson, but if you want to see like a Gibson-McCarver kind of duo, I think Flaherty and Contreras can be that when it comes to just teams not wanting to see them out there in a sense. And that's going to really be dependent on Jack Flaherty's health as well. I mean, that's a whole nother question to talk about on a later day, but the fact that you're going to have that, and I also want to see what he does with Wainwright as well. I mean, it already seems like they've got a great connection. I mean, Wainwright was the first guy to reach out to Contreras when he signed the contract, obviously joking around about it, can they get to 329 career starts just like Ian Molina? But it's good to see that, brotherhood accepting him early on, even though he was a Cub. But that's the beauty and curse of free agency as well. You don't have those just strong passions against another team or another player because eventually you may end up playing with them or for that team at some point. But to his credit, when he was a Cub, Wilson Contreras hated the Cardinals, and he did everything he possibly could to beat them. And he did say some things about Molina as well. Totally understandable. But that's the fire you're talking about. You want a guy that's like, hey, yes, I know I'm kind of a mercenary for hire. I will go to the team that pays me the most. But when I'm on your team, I ride or die with you. I'm going to be against your enemies, and I'm going to be for the team. And that's going to be something we're going to see with Wilson Contreras here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you talk about Wainwright joking about getting to 329 wins. Are we sure that Waino was joking? I mean, I can see Waino sitting around going, okay, so I'm going to be 41, so I'd have to be like 63. I can still throw, you can see him in his head trying to figure out how he could make that work.
Oh, yeah, you totally could. But he's already come out essentially and said that this year's his last year. But it's because it's going to be great to see him in the booth. I'll tell you that straight out. I cannot wait to see what that happens with as far as his post-baseball career. And that's another story for another day. We're going to have plenty of those. But let's keep it with Contreras real quick. And you talk about the fact that he hasn't caught a lot of games recently. DH a lot for the Cubs once that became the primary piece of the National League. And you think, okay, well, maybe it's because this dude has got a long and storied injury history. And he's had some injuries. He's dealt with some stuff. But I was looking at it today, and I'm actually a little surprised that, he hasn't been injured more and that he hasn't been out for longer. I mean, he's had 2 hamstring injuries in his career. Each of those injuries kept him out for 31 games. He had the knee injury back in 2021 that kept him out of 24. And then he missed 22 games this past season with an ankle injury, but it was in September, which is kind of the end of the season. They pretty much shut him down to basically get him healthy for the next season, regardless if he was going to be back in Chicago or not. So you look at that and you go, okay, well, he actually isn't as beat up as you would think he is for a guy being in the league for 7 years. Obviously, the Cardinals are going to have to use him more behind the plate than he was used in Chicago the last couple of years. Are there any concerns that he could potentially develop a significant injury in the next year or two that maybe you go, oh, man? I mean, you never want to wish it and you can never predict the future, but with the increased amount of time behind the plate, is there something that you could be worried about with him?
Well, I mean, like you just said, you just can't ever predict those things, especially at that position with all of the physical things they go through. I mean, think about some of the fluke injuries that Yachty had over the years.
I'm just thinking of I'm thinking of the Cup situation. Oh,
yeah. So I mean, you just never know. But the Cardinals are in a good situation because if they do have to DH him when something comes along, you do have Andrew Kisner, who did get lots of experience. I mean, he didn't play as well as you would have hoped last year, but he's a solid backup. If he has to play for an extended amount of time, you know that he is more than capable of doing that.
Oh, yeah, you 100%. And you've got other guys down in the minors that you hope are going to be able to come up and maybe get some significant playing time to at least see what you got. I mean, you saw Ivan Herrera come up last year for a short amount of time. Once again, just like Kisner, didn't really impress as much as you would hope he would have impressed. But another year in the minors and maybe a couple of stints at the major league level, maybe you start to see something a little bit more from him that can make you go, okay, maybe we can bring him up and spell Wilson for a little bit, put him in the DH role and go from there. So yeah, it does open up opportunities, but these guys have to start seizing these opportunities. And that's, kind of why you see, guys like the Alex Reyes DFA that, opportunities, yes, dealt with injuries, but opportunities presented themselves for some of these guys and they were never able to take advantage of that. That's why, and the Harrison Bader thing is a little bit different in my mind for a couple of different reasons, but that's another one. A guy that had to deal with injuries, never really, I don't think, fully grasped the opportunity that he had here with the Cardinals. Had a lot of success with New York last year, down the stretch and into the playoffs, and I wish him nothing but the best, and I hope he has a great season this year. But it seems like, some of these younger players haven't been able to really grasp the opportunities that have been given to them, and Dylan Carlson is another one this year that is going to have that opportunity where he needs to go out there and grab a hold of that center field position and that spot in the lineup, or you may see him be another part of a deal or maybe a DFA in the near future as well.
I think you got to give Dylan Carlson still some time. People, we talked about this. Everybody talked about Dylan Carlson. We had Tom Ackerman on our show a couple of years ago, multiple times. And he talked about, wait till you see this Dylan Carlson kid. He's amazing in the minor leagues. He's the real deal. He's going to do that. And we've had other people tell us that, and he got up here. And I can remember you and I were doing our other show at the time. And I remember when Dylan Carlson came up here, I actually went on the show like the day before and said, okay, everybody remember this kid's only 20. Don't expect him to be everything right away. Well, he's had his ups and downs. Guess what? He's not 23 yet. Dylan Carlson's still 22 years old. People want to give up on him. It's like he's still a baby. 75% of major leaguers aren't in the major leagues yet. Cardinal fans have gotten really to the point where they're like, oh, if we see them for a week and they're not good, we want to get rid of them. I'm blown away by how many people want to give up on Nolan Gorman. Nolan Gorman's 22 years old. He came up here last year, didn't play every day, hit 14 home runs, played decent second base. I mean, was he perfect? No, but he's still learning the position. He struck out a lot, but, at the end of his run last year, Albert had gotten hot and he wasn't getting a whole lot of playing time. And so he was really struggling because he'd never experienced that before. And so they sent him back to the minor leagues. And now you hear people going, oh, that Gorman, he's no good. He's never going to make it. He's washed up. Let's trade him for a bag of balls. He just turned 22. And so that's what worries me about Jordan Walker. There's so much hype about Jordan Walker. He's not 21 yet. He's going to get to spring training and still not be 21. And if everybody's expecting him, you hear people say, "Oh, he's the National League Rookie of the Year. He's going to be the right fielder. He's going to be calm down. It's very possible he gets to spring training and doesn't hit. There aren't a whole lot of Albert Pujols that come out of nowhere in spring training at 21 and all of a sudden a Rookie of the Year and the greatest right-handed hitter of all time. And Walker's been compared to Albert way too much in my mind. You keep hearing him being compared to Albert and to oh my gosh, I just forgot his name, and that's horrible. Passed away.
Oscar Taveras.
Taveras. I can't believe I forgot Oscar's name. Rest in peace, Oscar. But the same thing. Oscar had all that pressure when he came up. He was supposed to be the next Albert Pujols. And he really wasn't, if people remember. He had a couple of big moments, but he struggled that first year when he came up here, And so, people just need to calm down. Same thing with Mason Wynn, How many people did you hear, and you still hear go, "Oh, we don't need a shortstop. We don't need a second baseman." Mason Wynn's coming. Probably not probably not this year and maybe not next year. Again, he's only 20. And he hasn't really established the fact that he can hit consistently in the minor leagues. So, people just need to calm down and realize these kids may take a while. You've got to make moves outside the organization, and you have to give guys time to figure it out. And when you look at it, people go, well, back to Gorman. Well, Gorman struggled. He was horrible. He struck out all the time, and he was inconsistent. Donovan wasn't inconsistent. Yepes wasn't all that inconsistent. Well, guess what? Nolan Gorman was 21. Juan Yepes was 24. Brendan Donovan's 25. So they had more time in the minor leagues. They had more time in college. Gorman basically went from high school to a COVID year to a minor league year to, hey, 3 months and you're in the major leagues.
Yeah, all that with a couple of position changes too.
Right. So you just have to give these guys time. And, nobody moves along at the same pace. So, we all hope that at some point this year, Jordan Walker is ready to be there. But, it may be spring training. It may be July. It may be not till next year. You just don't know. So, and like I said, you just got to give these guys time to figure it out. And if the opportunity comes to make a move to help this team now, you need to do it and not say, "Oh, well, we're not going to do that," because this guy's coming down the road in maybe 2 or 3 years.
Well, yeah, you have to blend the future with what you need in the moment, because you can't waste the windows of an Arenado and a Goldschmidt and now a Wilson Contreras or even an Adam Wainwright or a Jack Flaherty. You have to kind of balance those two things. And kind of going back to your point about, these guys needing to learn and get the experience. I think a lot of Cardinals fans out there, they really key in on the guys that hit hard right off the bat. You think the Bo Harts, the Joe McEwings, even the Tommy Edmonds to an extent. These guys, Jeremy Hazelbaker, another one of those guys that, they come in and boom, right off the bat, they're popping home runs, they're driving in runs, they're creating all this excitement, and then some of them disappear off the face of the earth, essentially, and some of them, have some decent careers. McEwing obviously getting into coaching and all of that. But I think that's the thing is people forget that it does take time to develop some of these guys. You see it in baseball, you see it in hockey, not so much football, because I think football, you get the skills pretty early on and you just are refining them. Whereas, baseball and hockey and some of these other sports are so, I guess, minute details for everybody is different. And that's the thing you have to adjust to. The adjustments are harder in those sports. Not to say that football doesn't have adjustments that are difficult, but in baseball and hockey and these other sports, those adjustments are difficult because it's specific to each specific player that you have to adjust to them. And then when you have a guy like a Gorman that comes up and has highly touted and he just doesn't pop that first week, everybody goes, "Oh, well, that's it. He needed to come in and he didn't do what he needed to do." But to your point, these guys are young. It takes a while. How many players in the minors never make it to the majors? That's the thing you have to look at as well. It's a huge accomplishment to get to the major leagues and let alone be successful. The Hall of Fame isn't full of every single player that's ever played before. You got to work hard and be something special to get to that point. You don't have to be super special to make the majors, but you still have to put in a lot of hard work. And that's the thing that gets lost is all the hard work that went on before and the advancements that some of these guys have had to make. You get to the majors, it's a whole different ballgame at that point, because just like in every other professional sport, you're playing the best of the best at every spot. That's why college football teams will never play and very likely never beat an NFL team, because college players, you don't have the best players at every position on every team. You have some really, really good players in a lot of different spots, but in the NFL, you have quote unquote the best players at every position in every team in every game. And, that's the same thing in baseball as well. You're going up, you don't see Max Scherzer, unless it's a rehab start, down in the minors every fifth day, and these guys, these young players have to be able to adjust to that. And if they don't get consistent playing time as well, that's the other piece. You talked about it with Albert getting hot. Gorman was in sporadically. You can't get into a rhythm. You can't get into any sort of routine when you're coming off the bench cold and then expect to really go out there at a 21, 22-year-old and be able to produce. It's just not feasible.
Well, and you just brought up the perfect example in Max Scherzer. Everybody knows how good Max Scherzer is and what Max Scherzer's done in his career. But Max Scherzer didn't come up to the major leagues and was immediately Max Scherzer. He came up in Arizona and struggled and went back to the minor leagues a couple of times and then couldn't figure it out and couldn't throw strikes. And Arizona traded him to Detroit. And then he just struggled in Detroit for a year or two until he finally found his groove. And he was 27, I think, when he finally really settled in. So, again, a perfect example of that is Matthew Liberatore. How many people have you heard say, oh, Matthew Liberatore was supposed to be an ace? He's not an ace. He's maybe a third or fourth pitcher. He's 21. He's had one full year in the minor leagues. Give it time. If it took Max Scherzer 5 years in the majors before he became Max Scherzer, and I'm not saying Matthew Liberatore by any means is going to be Max Scherzer, but if it took Max Scherzer that long, just understand that it may take Matthew Liberatore until he's 23 to totally figure it out. And, and he's left-handed. How many times have we heard that sometimes it takes left-handers a little bit longer to figure stuff out, and they may pitch longer? How many crafty left-handers have been in their late 30s and their 40s because they didn't figure it out until they were almost 30, and then they were really good later. So, there's just so many different variables you have to look at. You can't look at each guy and go, okay, he's 22 and supposed to be a star. He hasn't done it in the first 30 games. He's going to suck now. Trade him.
But you got to have those immediate results, man. It's got to be immediate for sure. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. And once again, the Cardinals fans are spoiled. I mean, we've had so much success over such a long stretch of time that you just expect the guys that are coming in here to be able to just pop right in and produce. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt struggled when he first got here, and Arenado struggled a little bit when he first got here. There's scenery changes and all those kinds of things, big contracts you try to live up to. I mean, there's a whole lot of factors that go into it. Not everybody's going to be on every single game. No one's going to be perfect every single game. That's why guys are hitting 260, 275, 300. Nobody's hitting 1,000. I mean, it's not feasible. So yeah, once again, we're spoiled by the success, and it's kind of, I guess, worn our patience down a little bit in that, we're not as successful as we expect our teams to be, when really, 2019, we saw a Blues championship. Yes, it's been over 10 years since we saw a Cardinals World Series championship, but they are a perennial playoff contender. They maybe haven't shown up a little bit in the playoffs the last couple of years, but they're there, and a bounce here, a bounce there, all of a sudden they could be back in the World Series. So it's not like, we're the Pirates, who, I was looking at a document a little while before the show started about, just who was in first place and who was in last place in each division for the last 25, 30 odd years. The Pirates have been in last place about 75% of the time over that time frame. Like, to be a Pirates fan, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. You've seen so many great talents come through there. Nothing's been able to be put together to give yourself a really good shot at winning a division. But we haven't had that kind of bad luck in a sense. And our ownership wants to win, regardless of how some people think they might be thinking. But we're spoiled. And that's really what it comes down to is, we just got to have a little bit of patience. And in this day and age with everything being immediate, maybe we need to step back and go, okay, we've had a lot of success. Let's think about what we're actually upset about.
Well, right. And you just hit on it again. You talk about the Pirates. Think about the Mariners. We're complaining, hey, we haven't won a World Series since in 10 years. Yeah, we've been to the playoffs 7 times, but we haven't won a World Series in 10 years. This organization doesn't try. They don't care. This year was the first time the Mariners had been in the playoffs in 20 years. They hadn't been there since 2001. And they had great players, but it didn't work. Like you said, imagine being the Pirates. Imagine being the Angels. Think about being an Angels fan. And you've got all this great talent, but you can't put it together, and your ownership spends tons of money, but you never get anywhere. Or let's look at a team that's spending tons of money, and I'm not sure they're going to get anywhere anyway. Look at the Rangers. Look at the Padres. And you can say, hey, let's spend all kinds of money. Spend. We got to spend. Well, look at all the money the Padres have spent. Has it gotten them anywhere?
I think you and I were talking about this the other day. They have 3 infielders making $300 million. 3 infielders, each of them making over $300 million.
It's ridiculous. And I saw a stat, and this is how organizations run their, or this is how, presidents and general managers, ownerships run their organizations into a horrible hole. The Padres don't have one single starting pitcher or one single position player that's from their organization. They've traded away every single prospect that they have to make this run that hasn't worked to this point. I mean, yeah, they've gotten to the playoffs a couple of times, but they haven't won anything. And you're going to have to spend all this money, and you're going to have no prospects. And if it doesn't work, you blow it all up, and then what happens? Then you're looking 20 years down the road going, man, how do we get back to the playoffs? Because we have nothing to build with again.
Hey, you're the Marlins again. That's what the Marlins did. They bought 2 championships, right, dismantled pretty much the next year, and have been just in the bottom of the division for the last 30 years, essentially. I mean, outside of the 2 championship years. And that's another team that's had a lot of good young talent. And, they've also had a little bit of tragedy as well. That, when they were kind of on the rise, they, Jose Fernandez, another young player that passed away, another one that you just sit there and go, man, it's a tragedy for sure. And now they're starting to build things back up, but they have no fans that are going to games in a sense because they've been so terrible the last 10, 15 years. And now they've got a young, exciting team, and they're already even now talking about trading off some of those players. So you just get yourself into that vicious cycle of losing money and then having to trade players away to recoup capital to end up making money or even just breaking even. And you're never going to be able to get yourself onto the front foot. Whereas the Cardinals, at least, we hear people complain all the time about the fact that all it is it's about the money for them. It's about the money for them. Well, I mean, it is. You need to be able to have financial stability in a sense to be able to provide a winning culture and extend what you already have going. And that's what the Cardinals have done a good job of. And yes, it hasn't resulted in championships the last 10, 11 years, but that at some point soon, it's going to flip because it's a culture that's winning. Contreras came here because of the money and the culture and everything that goes along with being a St. Louis Cardinal. You're going to continue to see that. It's why Nolan Arenado did not opt out of his contract after this past season. It's why Paul Goldschmidt signed a long-term contract. It's why Matt Holliday stayed around. It's why Albert came back. I mean, all of that is a part of a successful franchise, and it does all come back to money, but you have to have the money to build the franchise, and they've just done a really good job of that.
They really have, working for the Cardinals, I can tell you that it's not all about the money. I mean, yes, you want to have a substantial income and you want to really have a profitable team, but the DeWitts and Mo and everybody in the organization, the most important thing to them is winning and making this team competitive and having a chance to win every year. And, you can't argue with what they've done going back now since basically 2000. I mean, there's been like in the last, 8 or 9 years, there's been 4 games total that you weren't at least in contention for a postseason spot. I mean, that just doesn't happen in baseball. Even with the best teams, the Yankees don't do that. The Red Sox don't do that. The Dodgers don't do that for that extended of a time period. So it's going to be really interesting to see how things go in baseball this year and the next couple of years, because spending in baseball is almost out of control right now. We thought with the new collective bargaining agreement and the lockout and everything that salaries were going to go down, the 10 and 11-year contracts were a thing of the past. Well, boy, were we wrong.
No, we are so wrong. And Blues Fan Reacts, watching YouTube on his shift. Dude, I hired you to work, man. Come on. But thanks for watching, and maybe I can provide you guys some more entertainment for work purposes tonight. So he's doing great. He's doing an awesome job for us. So yes, now there's two people in the Toasted St. Louis universe working together. So Mason doing a great job for sure. And if anybody's at the stores watching, hi, enjoy the rest of your night. Get closed and clean, please. So speaking of those big time contracts, there is a guy that the Cardinals are chasing that might get one of those big time contracts. We're not talking about Carlos Correa. We're not talking about Dansby Swanson. We're talking about Carlos Rodon, who pitched for the Giants last year, previously of the White Sox, looking like he may get a $200 million contract. And you and I kind of were going back and forth a little bit about this the other day about, is that something that, is he really even worth that? Because he's had 2 really good years the last 2 years, been in the top 6 in the Cy Young voting each of the last 2 years as well. So he's really started, once again, to develop into a good pitcher. It took a little time. Shocking. We were just talking about that. A 2.88 ERA last year, 14-8, had a 5.4 WAR going into at the end of the season last year, as an all-star each of the last 2 seasons as well. But is he a guy that's worth $200 million? I mean, I don't know if it's because he's, the Yankees and Giants are chasing after him, or if he's actually worth that. Where do you fall in his, hierarchy of being able to get a contract of that amount?
I don't think he's a $200 million pitcher. I really don't. I'm not sure that number's really where he's going to get to. There's so many rumors swirling about him right now that I'm just not sure are true. I'm not sure how much truth there is to all the rumors, and they're flying everywhere tonight that the Cardinals are in. The Cardinals are this. The Cardinals are this with Rendon. But then when you talk to people who actually are in the know with the Cardinals, I'm not sure that any of that is true. I'm not sure that that's not national media and agents just stirring stuff up, because I heard Derek Gould today kind of downplay that and basically say, I'm not really sure that the Cardinals have any real interest in Rendon. I've heard that from a couple other people that are in with the Cardinals that know what's going on pretty well. They're like, there's some interest, but they're not giving him $5 million, 5 years or 7 years or $200 million. That's just not going to happen. So I really don't know that there's that much interest from the Cardinals side in reality into Rendon. I mean, Mo yesterday said, on Cable X, basically said, we have money. Yes, we are shopping, but I wouldn't put a whole lot of faith in the rumors that you're hearing right now. And that was right after somebody at MLB Network, who loves to start big rumors like this, had reported that the Cardinals were the mystery team in on Carlos Rodon. So, I mean, is Mo being Mo and doing something and telling everybody, oh, no, we're not really doing that? That's very possible, because we know John Mozeliak loves to play poker with these kind of things and, drive the fan base crazy, because he won't leak anything to anybody. But I just kind of think it may be more media-driven than anything else. I'm kind of hearing the same thing with the Yankees. That Rodon really wants to go to the Yankees, but the Yankees maybe aren't as interested in him. So, I mean, it's hard to say, because, the winter meetings are over. And so now you've got all these national media guys who want to be the ones to break a story and say, oh, this guy's going here and we hear this and this team's interested. So there could be some smoke to the fire, but I wouldn't get too excited that Carlos Rodon is going to be wearing birds on the bat anytime soon.
Smoke to the fire, arson judge. Nice connection there.
All right.
If you guys didn't follow that scenario, oh boy, that was a lot of fun. I mean, and sometimes that's harmless too. Like it is kind of harmless fun, and it's with Twitter and all that stuff. No edit button unless you pay the $8 now for Twitter Blue. You can get an edit button, but that's a whole nother story again.
Well, it's a whole lot of fun unless you were a Giants fan last week.
Oh yeah. Well, I saw a post by somebody from one of the social media accounts from one of the fan sites or whatever in San Francisco that put it out there. It's the welcome to San Francisco, welcome to the Bay Area, Aaron Judge, blah 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 blah. And then they sent one out the next day. It was all scratched out saying, "Oops."
Right.
Like, yeah, you gotta wait till the official word comes out before you start celebrating.
Well, and that's where you have to be somewhat responsible as a journalist. Like we said, these guys want to break stories and they want to have their names out there, but you got to realize too that you're affecting a fan base. These fans are watching you because they're excited about their team and they're excited about something. When you report, hey, this guy's headed here, it's pretty much a done deal. Fans get pretty excited, and then 8 minutes later, you're like, oh, hey, no, yeah, he's going to the other side of the country. I don't know how many gifts I've seen this week with a tombstone for Aaron Judge's 8 minutes in San Francisco.
Hey, somebody did a really, really good job with that, for sure. For sure. All right, well, if it's not Rodon, where else are the Cardinals going to go in the offseason? I mean, there's not a whole lot of options left out there, especially at the money that they are probably wanting to spend. Do you see them maybe leaning into the trade market and possibly making a deal there? It came out yesterday that the Mets possibly shopping Carlos Carrasco might be an option. The Mets are maybe looking for that a depth outfielder and some reliever help. Could a Lars Nootbaar and a depth reliever be something that brings in a Carlos Carrasco to the Cardinals? Is that somebody that you would see in a uniform? Some of the other names, Shane Bieber, Pablo Lopez, seem to have probably massive price tags when it comes to what the Cardinals would need to offer in order to bring those guys in. And with Lopez, the Twins are heavily involved in trying to bring him into Minnesota. So, are those the options, or do you see something else on the horizon that maybe the Cardinals could go, okay, that's what we're going to do?
There's a guy that I would like to see them go get, and I've mentioned his name to you a couple of times, and we talked about him even at the trade deadline last year. He's pitching in Chicago, not for the Cubs, but for the White Sox. He's young. He's been a Cy Young candidate a couple of times. And here's another connection to the Cardinals. One of his very best friends and high school teammates is Cardinal starting pitcher who is a free agent that maybe if you go get him, maybe you sign both of them. Maybe there's your 1-2 for years and years and years. I'm talking about Lucas Giolito, who's high school childhood friend of Jack Flaherty. Lucas Giolito, to me, would be the guy I would be circling and going, okay, let's go see what the White Sox want, because the White Sox don't seem to really have a clear path as to what they're trying to do. They went out and have made some moves. There have been reports they're wanting to move Giolito, wanting to shake some things up. So that would be the guy that I would go look at and see if potentially you could get Lucas Giolito for – it's going to be a haul, but it's not going to be as big as you might think. And just to tie that all together, another friend of those guys whose name has been floated today a couple of times as possibly being available, may at least be considering shopping Max Fried.
I would be okay with Max Fried. I think he would be a welcome addition to this Cardinal rotation for sure. But once again, it comes down to what the want is from the teams like Chicago and Atlanta of what you would have to give up to get those guys. And somebody that might have some insight into that, it's going to be our special guest we're getting ready to bring in here. And he's been on the show before, and he's currently handling father duties with 2 children by himself and still looking chipper as always. Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN joining us. Alex, how you doing today?
I'm good. That's the caffeine that looks so chipper. Believe me, as soon as I sit down, I'm going to crash. So, but no, I appreciate you guys being flexible, but solo dad duty while the wife works and had to get both of them down. And so they're down now and looking to party.
Hey, that's awesome. That's awesome. We're talking a little bit about the Cardinals right now. We're going to transition to the Blues here in just a second, but we're talking about what the next step is for the Cardinals and looking at the trade market. And Scott threw out Lucas Giolito and Max Fried as 2 names that are intriguing to him. Are those guys that you could see possibly the Cardinals looking at, or are the price tags too high for those guys as well?
Yeah, let's start with Max Fried because he's the one that kind of dropped earlier today with Jim Callis on MLB Network talking about possibly him being available. I was kind of skeptical of it, and we actually talked with Jim Duquette, former Major League Baseball general manager, on our show today, and Jim Duquette said, yeah, it would make sense considering he's got 2 more years of control, and if they don't feel like they can trade him, but Buster Olney then tweeted out saying that there's no chance that happens. So this is Major League Baseball offseason. Everyone's trying to make something look interesting and throwing rumors out there. I would be interested in Max Fried. Lucas Giolito's injury history makes me a little concerned, but I mean, look, at the end of the day, I know everyone continues to talk about wanting to go get a pitcher, and I'm fine with it. I think it would be good if you go out there and get a pitcher. I think your pitching depth is fine, but I also think that you look to upgrade at it. But if you're going to, get an ace. Don't go get a guy who's a third man in your rotation. If they're going to be aggressive, go get somebody that when the trade happens, we are arguing internally who the number one is when they're healthy, Jack Flaherty or the acquisition.
I think you absolutely nailed it right there.
So,
yeah, no more of this dumpster diving.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk out there floating around about Carlos Rodon, and the Cardinals keep getting thrown in the rumor mill that they're hot and heavy on Rodon. I personally don't think there's a whole lot of truth to that. From what you've heard, do you think the Cardinals are involved in Carlos Rodon, or do you think his price tag is for them?
Yeah, I'm very skeptical of that. I mean, anytime you hear somebody use the phrase mystery team and then use the Cardinals in that same conversation, you know that the Cardinals are not in that conversation because John Mozeliak doesn't operate that way. John Mozeliak does not become a mystery team and have that information leaked. He actually said Sunday on the Cardinals radio network with Mike Claiborne that anything you're reading in the rumors right now, don't believe. And that, of course, was when the Carlos Rodon thing dropped. I would never say never with this because we've saw more conversations that included the Cardinals saying that they're kind of still involved in the conversation. I feel like the Cardinals are involved in the conversation if Carlos Rodon drops his asking price down to less than 6 years. And I just don't see that happening. I don't believe the Cardinals are going to get involved with a starting pitcher who's 29, going on 30 years old, has had injury histories in the past, and is asking for 6 years at $180 million. So never say never. I didn't think the Cardinals would sign Wilson Contreras, and they found a way to go out there and acquire him. But for Carlos Rodon, it makes me skeptical because I don't believe the rumors that have the Cardinals involved.
Rodon turned 30 just 3 days ago, so he's fresh into his year 30 right now. But yeah, 6 years. I mean, that's a scary proposition with the injury history as well for him. All right, we've talked about the Cardinals long enough. We got to talk about what's really important, what's really going on right now, and what you basically have your hands in a whole lot of, which are the St. Louis Blues. I want to say a big win last night against Nashville. Been there picking up his 100th career victory, an overtime win. It was 1-0. The game didn't necessarily feel great, but it was also moments where you were like, okay, I see this team kind of coming together again right now. And it's been a tough stretch, and we're still under 30 games into the season. What's kind of been your read on this team going, into their longest road stretch of the season and hitting Western Canada too?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're a tough team to read right now. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, ors about it with this team. It's sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down. Coming to the rink, you really don't know what you're going to get. I would say it's a big win because you had to beat Nashville. If you would have lost to Nashville, I would have probably been all aboard the panic bus there because Nashville is the exact same team as you. Nashville in that game last night had 3 American Hockey League defensemen playing. Nashville's a team that has not been scoring a lot of goals, and Nashville's a team that's 500, and they were sitting 2 points ahead of you. So I know you tied them in points because you forced overtime, and you scored that, so you tied them in points. They've got 3 games in hand on you. But if you would have lost that game, I would have been looking at this saying, okay, well, you couldn't beat the team that is 5th place in the Central Division. So it was nice for them to win that game. I think they've had back-to-back performances that you can feel like that they're starting to grow. The biggest thing for me with this Blues team is kind of what we've seen Jeremy Rutherford write in The Athletic. It's what we've heard Doug Armstrong and Craig Berube say. They're just they're not a confident team. And in the losses that we've seen against the Winnipeg Jets and the Colorado Avalanche, and prior to that, you could just see it coming with this Blues team. And in the last game against Nashville, they looked like a much more confident team. So there is still plenty of opportunity for this team to get it turned around. This road trip is going to be a massive one when you talk of Edmonton and Calgary and Vancouver and Seattle and Vegas, all 5 teams sitting in the playoffs in the Pacific Division. So this is going to be a testing mode for Doug Armstrong to look at this team and say, are they playoff caliber? Are they not playoff caliber? But for right now, it's good strides, but you have to continue to back it up.
Well, with this team, it has been a bit of a struggle, and Blues Fan Reacts checking in, saying hello as well. You look back at 2019, and this team was dead last. I mean, absolutely dead last. They looked horrific. This team doesn't look like that, and they're in a better position than they were at that point in time as well. So you know that they can go on a run, and a lot of it's got to deal with some of the injuries that they've had to deal with as well. You've also lost a couple of players. You know, you lost David Perron, who was a big piece of this team the last couple of years. But that's the thing that gets me is you just essentially lost David Perron, and that's really about it. What is different about this team by losing just one guy and everything changing? Or is it the fact that you lose a guy like Jim Montgomery, who was really getting that power play and penalty kill clicking, and you lose that kind of structure and you see his success in Boston? Is it the player loss, or do you think it's more of the coaching loss that has affected this team?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, Jim Montgomery, it's pretty obvious that the penalty kill suffered for the longest time. It's nice to see that they got that righted in the last couple of games, but it's pretty obvious that Jim Montgomery had an effect on this team. And Jeremy Rutherford's phenomenal reporting talking about how Montgomery had kind of a text chain with a lot of the Russian players and had a really good kind of ambiance with those offensive players. And of course, you lose him and look what happens. But I personally feel like it's more impactful when you lose a guy like David Perron. And this is just my opinion. I haven't heard any of the guys talk about this because, you know, they say move on from it. But David Perron was a guy that has been around for all the way up to that Stanley Cup championship season. He's a guy who was tenured in the NHL. He had played with some of the best players like Sidney Crosby and Ryan Getzlaf around the National Hockey League. And I think David Perron was a guy that knew how the Blues needed to play to be successful. He knew the transition of identity from the Keith Tkachuks and the David Backuses and the Alex Petrangelos. And I think he was one of those leaders that didn't wear a letter that kept that locker room in place. And when you lose David Perron, you lose a guy who isn't afraid to come out and talk to the media and say, we're not playing Blues hockey. We're being too tentative. We're not dumping the puck. We're not playing the way that we need to play. David Perron knew how they needed to play. It was dump the puck, go after it, win the board battles, and put pressure on the goaltender. And they've gotten away from that for some individual players. And that's what Craig Berube's talked about. You've gotten guys who like to play that dump and chase style that Craig Berube deems successful. And then you've got guys that like to play the run and gun style that I feel like they're trying to transition that identity to. I think the loss of David Perron off of the ice was very impactful for this team. And now they're just trying to figure out who that next voice in the locker room is. And I know that sounds crazy because you've got O'Reilly, you've got Shen, you've got Parayko, you got all these guys who have been with this team since they won the Cup. But O'Reilly's the kind of guy that's not going to go out in the media and talk his feelings. He's going to back up what he says on the ice. He's going to show rather than tell. Braden Shen is a guy who is going to show rather than tell. That's why I actually prefer what Jordan Binnington told Jeremy Rutherford on The Athletic. I want a guy who's not afraid to come out in the media and say, like, we need to be better, but then back it up on the ice. And I feel like Jordan Binnington did that. So I just think right now they just need vocal guys who will say it and actually do it on the ice.
So with the team struggling and being up and down like they have been all year long, how much of a window do you think that they have left before and say, okay, you know, we have a chance to turn this thing around and maybe be a playoff team, or we've got to make some moves and maybe make some hard decisions and trade some guys that we really don't want to trade?
Yeah, that's a good question. And honestly, there's conflicting ideas on that, because you can ask certain players or general managers or former players and they'll say, oh, you kind of have an idea already. Once you're a third of the way through the season or a fourth of the way through the season, you know. But if you ask guys who played in the NHL a little bit years ago, or guys who kind of have a different pulse on the league, they'll say 50, 55 games. Like Ray Ferrario was on our show last week, and we asked him if this is a playoff team, and he said, yeah, they're a playoff team, but I don't know if they're a team that can push for a Stanley Cup right now. And he said, you'll know that at about the 50-game mark. So me personally, I don't know if I've seen the same team that we saw last year that made that run that looked like they almost beat Colorado and probably would have went on to the Stanley Cup final. I don't think I've seen that. I think this team could still squeak into the playoffs. But I also believe that Doug Armstrong is being realistic. And if you go back and look at that year that they traded Paul Stastny away, I think they were 7 games over 500. They were 5 points out of a playoff spot. And I mean, there was a team that was surprised, but Doug Armstrong said, I need to be looking at the future rather than the now. And the now shows me that this is a team that won't go deep in the playoffs. So I think Doug believes that's probably where this team is at right now, but they've got plenty of opportunities to change his mind. This 5-game, 6-game road trip going into the holidays, that's an opportunity. If the Blues go into this road trip and pick up 5 victories, you say, okay, maybe they're back in this one. But I think right now the needle is pointing more towards looking at this team and saying, maybe we need to see what we could get on the market with some of these unrestricted free agents.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this team go on a 7-game winning streak, and we've also seen them go on the 8-game losing streak. So they've shown that they can put stuff together, and that's really what it comes down to, is what that mindset is, and then who is the guy or guys that are going to get moved. I mean, you've seen what they've done with the David Perrons, with the Alex Petrangelos in years past, where they have known essentially that they weren't going to bring them back, and then they let them go, even if they're a fan favorite. You look at a guy, and we talked a little bit about this before the season started. You look at Ryan O'Reilly, doesn't have a contract. He's your captain, but is he a guy that you look at and go, if this team is selling or at least making plans for the future, is he a guy that's on the block? Or if not him, is there somebody else in your mind that you go, that's the guy they're going to have to target to try and get something back in here to help the future of this team?
Yeah, I mean, if you're Doug Armstrong, I think you're kind of looking at this in a couple of different ways. And let's just break down the UFAs right now for Doug Armstrong. Let's start with Vladimir Tarasenko. I think a lot of people look at Vladdy and say, oh, well, he's gone. See what you can get on the open market for him. I don't know if I would buy into that yet, but I do think that if you're Doug Armstrong, you're probably looking at that and you're saying, all right, you see what a guy like Claude Giroux garnered on the free agent market last year by Philadelphia. You got Owen Tippett, who's a really good prospect, and then you were able to get a first-round draft pick. That's probably something that Doug would be looking at and saying, all right, let's see if we can get that for Vladimir Tarasenko. Problem, though, is he's got a no-trade clause. So are there going to be teams willing to trade the assets that you're wanting for Vladimir Tarasenko? And is he willing to go to that team? So that's going to be the first hurdle. Ivan Barbashev's probably the next one to go, and I think if you're any team in the National Hockey League trying to win a Stanley Cup, Ivan Barbashev's somebody you want on your roster. Jim Montgomery is a perfect example with the Boston Bruins. It would not surprise me one bit if he's looking at Ivan Barbashev and saying, man, let's see if we can acquire this guy for a Stanley Cup run.
You better not let Curbs hear you say that.
Believe me, he's not feeling it either. But I mean, it's kind of where you're at right now with it. Barbashev doesn't have a no-trade clause, but I don't know if Barbashev's getting you a first-round draft pick. If you're lucky, maybe a second-round pick, depending on how desperate a team is. But you also have to realize that he's going to be difficult to try and re-sign. And then you get to O'Reilly. And O'Reilly's the one that I just don't know yet. I personally feel like I would look and see what's available if I'm Doug Armstrong, and I feel like it's necessary to trade him. Because, again, this could change. They could go on a run, and we could sit here and say, don't touch him. But I think O'Reilly, depending on what teams need, everyone wants a defensive two-way centerman who can run a penalty kill, run a power play, and be playing 19, 20 minutes a night for you. And the guy won an MVP in the Stanley Cup Finals. So he'll garner something really good on the market. But if I'm Doug Armstrong, I think I'm going to have a conversation with him first, and I'm going to say, do you want to be here? Because if there's 2 ways you go about this if you're Doug, the rebuild or the retool. If you want to rebuild, sell everything and get what you can. If you want to retool, I think I would have a conversation with O'Reilly to say, do you want to be here? Can we make this work for us and for you? And if so, let's get a deal done. If not, let's make a trade and then come back to us in the offseason. They've done this before. Doug Waite did it when they traded him to Carolina. Keith Tkachuk did it when they traded him to Atlanta. it's not out of the realm of possibility that you could trade him and still go back to the table in the free agent market.
Would a guy like Torrey Krug, who's been, kind of a disappointment this year, he's struggled a little bit with the salary that he still has, is that a guy that you could trade and get you anything for at this point, or would it be more of a salary dump, do you think, if you were able to move a guy like that?
I don't know if you'd be able to move a guy like that. I think with Torrey Krug, you got 5 years left on his deal at 6.5, or 4 years left on his deal at $6.5 million per year. It would be tough for a team at the trade deadline to say, yeah, let's take on Torrey Krug's contract for the next 4 years to help us win a Stanley Cup now. So I know people want to get rid of Torrey Krug because of that amount of money, and he's not the defenseman that people want him to be. But when healthy, Torrey Krug is an asset on the power play. And I mean, he's shown it with his 5 goals this season, which I think 3 or 4 of them have been on the power play. I would probably look and see if there's something out there for Torrey Krug, but you tried that in the offseason this past year when you tried to acquire Matthew Tkachuk and nothing worked. So I think your best play with Torrey Krug is to play it out this season with him and see if somebody's interested in the offseason. But again, are you going to rebuild or are you going to retool? Because if you're going to retool and you want to compete next year, you're going to need Torrey Krug, and you're just going to need Torrey Krug to play to his abilities. I thought he played really well the other night against Nashville and Colorado, Nashville didn't play Colorado, but you're going to need his abilities on the ice if you want to try and do a quick turnaround. So I wouldn't be so quick to move him out, but I also don't think you're going to get anything back in return for Torrey Krug, and you're probably going to have to eat some of his salary on top of it.
Yeah, you certainly are. And you talked a little earlier about, with Doug Armstrong kind of always looking to the future, always trying to make the team better, in the future. Do the contracts that he's given out to defensemen kind of not like throw in your face that theory, or is that just something that it's the byproduct of the fact that this team doesn't have a whole lot of defensive prospects that he felt like he needed to sign these guys long-term? I mean, Justin Falk's been great. Torrey Krug, yeah, you probably paid him maybe a little more than what he was probably worth, but he's been decent for this team. Then you got the contracts out there. Nick Leddy had his. You had Marco Scandella get his, picked up with Parayko. Parayko got the long-term deal. So we signed 5 of our defensemen to multi-year long-term contracts. But then you turn around and say, once again, that you're trying to look at the future of this team. Does that make sense to you, or is that just one of the byproducts of the NHL right now, where if you get a good, decent defenseman, you got to try and lock them up?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So let's go piece by piece here, because I think you could track this all the way back to Alex Pietrangelo. Whatever people want to believe, Justin Falk was the replacement for Alex Pietrangelo, or Justin Falk was a guy that was just available. I don't know the answer to that. All I could go off of was what I believe. I believe that the contract conversations took place before they acquired Justin Falk with Pietrangelo, and they didn't get anywhere. And so the Blues said, all right, well, let's see, because Justin Falk's available. Let's see if we can get him just in case. You got Justin Falk because Justin Falk is a great defenseman. And you got Justin Falk and you locked him up to $6.5 million, because if he would have gone anywhere else, Justin Falk would have gotten paid probably more than what he got from the Blues. So I feel like that was a deal that you got, and it was a steal of a defenseman, and you said, let's lock him up. You lose Alex Pietrangelo because you didn't want to pay the price for him, but you felt like you had your core in place of Justin Falk, Colton Parayko, Jay Bouwmeester. I'm trying to think. They didn't have Marco Scandella yet, if I'm not mistaken. So, but you had Carl Gunnarsson.
Bortuzzo in that mix too.
So you had your core in place there, and you said, okay, from the right side, we got Parayko and Falk, and we've got Bouwmeester and whomever I'm forgetting right now on the left side. So then you get to the conversations with Parayko, and they were outspoken about saying that Colton Parayko is the alpha dog. Colton Parayko is the guy we believe can take this team to the next step. And so you pay the guy. And I know people don't like Colton Parayko because he's not the offensive defenseman that you think, and he's also not Chris Pronger on the defensive side. But Colton Parayko on the open market is getting paid $8.5 million. I mean, if Zach Werenski and Darnell Nurse and Jared Spurgeon are getting paid $8-9 million, Seth Jones is getting paid $9 million, Colton Parayko is getting closer to $7.5 million. But the Blues got a steal because they gave him more money. I mean, we talk about this with the Cardinals, right? You want to get a shortstop, You want to lower the AAV, give him more years. It's what the Padres did with Xander Bogaerts. So that's what they did with Colton Parayko. And I think it made sense at the time. He just hasn't lived up to what people were expecting from him. You signed Torrey Krug because you lost a power play specialist in Alex Pietrangelo. And Torrey Krug was the best power play defenseman on the open market by far. And you got him for $6.5 million. Maybe a little bit of an overpay, but you needed power play help because you lost Alex Pietrangelo, and now you are filling somebody on the power play. So again, your top four is Torrey Krug, Jay Bouwmeester, Colton Parayko, Alex Pietrangelo, looking pretty darn good. Or I'm not Alex Pietrangelo, Justin Falk. Jay Bouwmeester gets injured. You get Marco Scandella. Marco Scandella plays very solid for you when you acquire him, and you lock up Marco Scandella. So it's a long-winded answer of me basically saying I think Doug Armstrong did what any general manager was going to do. You had the pieces in place, and you saw what the potential was. They just haven't lived up to that potential. And Doug Armstrong has the quote, it's hard to eat when you're full. And all of these guys got paid. And it's hard to continue that pressure that you've put on yourself to be so good when you've got that money in your back pocket. So when you go big picture with it and you look at it and you say, damn, that's a pretty good defensive core, you lock it up. But then once you lock it up, all of the expectations go through the roof because this guy's getting paid $6.5 million for 7 years. He better be the best defenseman in the National Hockey League. Well, it's not going to work out all of the time. So I think the Blues kind of zigged when the NHL zagged in terms of let's focus on D while the other teams are focusing on offense, and we'll get offense from our defensemen. Again, it just hasn't lived up to what the potential was supposed to be for these guys.
Talking about money and potential young guys that both got big. Thomas, Jordan Kyrou was kind of whipping away early in the season. How do you think they're kind of living up to the hype in those contracts as the year has progressed?
I think both have been exactly as advertised. And, I loved Doug Armstrong's quote when he was asked about them in the midst of the 8-game losing streak. And he said, well, right now they're not getting paid like $8 million players, right? They're getting paid $3 million players. And they're playing like $3 million players. But that's the growing pains of the NHL. Like Jordan Kyrou didn't ask to get paid $8 million. Jordan Kyrou's talent got him paid $8 million. That makes sense. It's like, of course, he's asking for $8 million. But Jordan Kyrou was one of the best offensive players in the National Hockey League for one whole season when he was going into his RFA status. So I thought it's what a lot of teams do. I mean, surprisingly, I thought Jason Robertson was going to get kind of a long-term deal like Jordan Kyrou, but I think Jason Robertson played it smart that said, I'm going to bank on myself and you're going to sign me for 4 years and then you're going to have to sign me again for a longer big contract. But Jordan Kyrou started off slow. But I also think Jordan Kyrou was being a square peg forced into a round hole playing with Ryan O'Reilly. Because then the pressure was on him that was, okay, now you're David Perron. And Jordan Kyrou is the complete opposite of David Perron. Jordan Kyrou is speed and finesse. He's not the, I'm going to beat you into the boards and take the puck away from you. That's how David Perron played. Jordan Kyrou turns the puck over. I think we all just have to understand that that's how he's going to play the game. But Jordan Kyrou also makes highlight reel plays and makes defensemen look silly with his speed. And I think he's getting better and improving on the two-way side of the game. I actually think probably after the 8-game losing streak, when they started to win some games, Jordan Kyrou looked like the guy that should be getting paid $8 million. He was okay in his own zone, but he was making those big plays in the offensive zone. So I think Jordan Kyrou is just going to be growing pains. Jordan Kyrou is going to be the process of it's a young player while the Blues are transitioning into a new style. And Robert Thomas, Robert Thomas has been going through it a little bit, and you could see the struggles on his face. But I also think Robert Thomas is trying to get that chemistry down with his line mates that hasn't been working. He's had Kyrou with him. He's had Buchnevich with him. He's had Tarasenko with him. He's had Saad with him. I think when you get some steady players where it's just consistent with Robert Thomas, he'll get going. But I also think Robert Thomas is probably putting a lot of pressure on himself also of trying to win games himself because everyone's looking at that contract and you try to do a little too much. So I think these guys are going to be right where they need to be as the salary cap continues to go up in the NHL. I think Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou are going to be on contracts that people are going to be saying, wow, that's a steal. Because David Pastrnak, the reports now are Pasternak's going to get $11 million per year. Now, Pastrnak is a absolutely completely different player than Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas, but that's going to be the going rate for offense, $11 million in the NHL. So $8 million for a guy who could be a 30, 35 goal scorer, maybe 40 goal scorer for you. And then a guy who pushing 80 to 90 points in a season in Robert Thomas, $8 million each. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and we talked about this in our Cardinal talk before you came on. You know, guys in every sport, they struggle at the beginning of a big-time contract because that pressure is on there. And these guys are also really young. This is their first big-time contract. So a lot of that pressure is on you, and you now are kind of being looked at as the face of the team. And you nailed it right on the head about the fact that this team has had to go through so many different line combinations as well. Obviously, Saad's been out with an injury. Pavel Buchnevich has been out with an injury. And that's a guy that I think if you want to talk about a steal that Doug Armstrong has made, Pavel Buchnevich is the absolute steal. I mean, we thought the O'Reilly deal was great, but to be able to trade Sammy Blais and a pick for Buchnevich and see the 9 goals, 11 assists so far this year, and he's only going to get better, I think, once he gets healthy. You look at this, and I think you go back to the rebuild, retool part of all this is we had some of our fans talk a little bit about, is Doug Armstrong the guy for the job? Is he the guy for the job for the retool or the rebuild, or is he only good for one of those? And if that's the case, if they decide to go full rebuild, is Doug Armstrong looking for another job, or are the Blues going to ride or die with him one way or the other?
It's another really good question. He's done both with the Blues. And I don't know if people remember this. Like, Doug Armstrong was the GM that took over for John Davidson when they were transitioning into kind of a team that was going to get new ownership when Tom Stillman and his team took over. And Doug Armstrong came in with a team that had already drafted Eric Johnson first overall, had a couple of young players already in place, and I believe TJ Oshie and David Perron. And he took that team that was in no way, shape, or form ready to compete and win. He took it and was kind of at the other end of the rebuild. And he drafted Alex Pietrangelo. He drafted Schwartz and Vladimir Tarasenko. And then they started winning games. And then he started the wheeling and dealing side of things. You trade Eric Johnson for Chris Stewart and Kevin Shattenkirk. You know, you trade a couple of players that kind of Curbs talks about it all the time, you know, like acquiring Yaroslav Halak from Montreal, trading away Ben Bishop, which I know people are still livid about, but you traded him away for assets that turned into pieces that helped you continue to build. So that's the rebuild side of it. And Doug had a hand in that rebuild. And also people forget that Doug was also kind of the assistant GM before he took over as the GM. So he's had his hand in this rebuild for this team. And then you think of the transitions that Doug has done. He transitioned away from the Barrett Jackman, Keith Kachucks into the David Backuses. He transitioned from the David Backuses into the Alex Pietrangelos, and the Alexander Steen's kind of in the middle of that. And then he transitioned from the Alex Pietrangelos to where they're at right now. And I know people don't look at it and say, well, where they're at right now doesn't look too pretty. We're also talking about a team, in my opinion, that COVID doesn't happen. They're going to the Stanley Cup final that year. That team was too damn good not to go to the Stanley Cup final. And then of last year, I think you beat Colorado if Binnington doesn't get hurt. You walk away from Edmonton with no problem, and you're taking Tampa on in the Stanley Cup. Would people be feeling the same about Doug Armstrong if we're talking about 2 more Stanley Cup appearances in a matter of, 4 years? So, and I know those are ifs and hopes and buts, but that's just kind of the way I look at it. So when people ask the question of, can Doug do the rebuild or retool if they get to it, he's done both. And I think rebuild is going to be a longer process. And I said this on postgame a few nights ago. I think it was after that Rangers loss where I was getting texts that said, blow it up, start from scratch. This team's no good. They're not going to be any good. And I said, I don't know if fans can handle a rebuild. I looked at it. The Detroit Red Wings, look, they've got Steve Yzerman, and they're going to be a damn good team. But do people understand that they've had top 10 picks since 2016? And, I mean, they've hit on some of them. The others are to be determined. But that's what you're going to go through if you want to rebuild. Look at what Montreal's dealing with. Look at what Arizona's dealing with. You're in for a 5 to 7 year rebuild if you want to do that. I think that Doug Armstrong has pulled off the magic before. I think Doug Armstrong can do a quick transition and open up another Stanley Cup window because of the talent that they have in place. You've got Buchnevich, you've got Kyrou, you've got Thomas, you've got Braden Shen, you've got Colton Parayko and Letty and Krug and Falk, and you've got Jordan Binnington. And I know people hear that and say, well, that's not a Stanley Cup championship team. Maybe not, but if you put the right pieces in place with it, if you make a Pavel Buchnevich trade or a Ryan O'Reilly trade, you might be talking about a window opening back up again. So I think that if they're going to go down that path, either the retool or rebuild, you need Doug Armstrong and Craig Berube at the helm of it. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot longer of a process than people are going to be ready for.
Yeah, I remember the post-lockout Bill Laurie days and the Pronger trade and all of that. So, yeah, I personally don't want to go through that again because
God, no.
I mean, some of my favorite players came out of that time frame, especially Eric Boganicki. Love that name, love that player. we had some good guys that helped to get this team to where it is. But yeah, I don't want to go through that again. All right, one more question before we let you get out of here because I know you got to get your sleep, but you got to get ready for the show tomorrow as well. This is actually not Blues related in a sense. I just got the notification from ESPN. The Capitals are getting ready to start playing. Ovechkin still continuing to push forward to 800 goals and so on and so forth. I got to get your thoughts on this. Does he come close or even break the record?
Oh, yeah. He absolutely breaks the record. He absolutely breaks the record because if you're Alex Ovechkin, you're playing for one reason. You're playing to break that record. You want to be the greatest goal scorer in the National Hockey League. And look, Alex Ovechkin can do it. He's still got the scariest shot on the power play in the National Hockey League, and there is nobody even close to Alex Ovechkin. But then on top of it, like, he's doing all of this throughout these injuries. Like, he is still being productive with all of these injuries around his team. He hasn't had Nicholas Backstrom for like 2 years, it feels like. Tom Wilson has been out all season. TJ Oshie has been out all season. Lars Eller has been injured for them. Anthony Mantha has not been good for them. I think Alex Ovechkin gets there because if my math was correct, he would have to score 40 goals for the next 3 seasons to get to it, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe that was last season, but he is always consistent in terms of he's going to give you 40 goals in a season, and he's going to play in probably about 75 to 80 games. So, yeah, he breaks it. And by the way, I saw John Buccigross on Twitter. I believe it was him that put the tweet out that said, if you're Alex Ovechkin, you cannot score the goal to break Wayne Gretzky's record with an empty netter. And I 100% back that one. If he scores an empty netter, if I'm Alex Ovechkin and it's the end of the season and like I've hit the number, I beat his record and it's the end of the year, I'm coming back for one more season and I'm scoring an even strength goal just so I can say that nobody's going to talk about how, oh, well, he scored the empty net goal. But yeah, he absolutely breaks that record. And honestly, I can't wait to see that happen because we'll all be able to say that we saw the greatest hockey or the greatest goal scorer because he's never going to be the greatest hockey player. But we'll be able to see we saw the greatest goal scorer in the NHL in Alex Ovechkin.
Oh, I've been a fan of him since he came into the league. I've never been a Crosby fan. I can't stand him. I don't know why. He's a great player. I respect him for sure, but I hated him so much. But yeah, to be able to see, even Gretzky at the end of his career, still seeing what he was able to do, and then to be able to sit there and say, I saw Gretzky and Ovechkin. Yeah, hands down, that's pretty awesome. All right, well, Alex, thank you so much for hopping on with us, talking Blues hockey. Hopefully next time we have you on, we're talking about like a 12 or 15 game winning streak.
That would be fantastic. And I apologize. I looked distracted earlier. My computer had 2% left and my battery wasn't charging. So I didn't want to drop on it in the middle of you guys. But always a pleasure to come on with you both. You guys do a great job with this show. So you guys know anytime you need me, you just shoot me a message and I'm happy to hop on.
Oh, that sounds great. Alex Ferrario, 101 ESPN. Make sure you catch him on BK Ferrario on 101 Mondays through Fridays. Thanks again, Alex. Have a happy holiday as well.
See you guys. Thank you. You too.
All right, Alex Ferrario, kind enough to join us on Father Duty tonight. Got the kids to bed and was able to still jump on and talk Blues hockey. And you know what? I feel better. I feel a little bit better about this team going forward. It wasn't like totally down in the dumps, but I feel good about where we're at right now. And I just hope by the time Christmas rolls around, I'm still feeling this good.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, Alex can definitely make you feel better about them. He is definitely the eternal optimist when it comes to the Blues. And hope. Oh, wow, I'm sorry. I apologize. I hope he's right. I hope we do have really good things to see in the next couple of weeks.
Yep, it's going to be fun for sure. And yeah, big time road trip coming up starting on Thursday night. This is the hardest part about this road trip, I think, is you got 2 back-to-backs. You've got Thursday and Friday against Edmonton and Calgary, 2 incredibly fast teams that you seem to always have trouble with when you go on the road. Then you've got back-to-backs on Monday and Tuesday against Vancouver and Seattle before Friday night in Vegas. So definitely a tough stretch, but if the Blues can come away with, I sit there and say if they can come away with 3 wins in that 5-game stretch, I feel really, really good going into the holiday break.
Yeah, that would be huge if they could do that because their schedule doesn't really lighten up for quite a while. They've got a tough 15-game stretch coming up here where it's not real pretty.
No, it certainly isn't. You start a couple games against Toronto coming up, so you got some of the East coming in as well. So yeah, it's not going to be easy, and this is that time frame where they need to really start collecting some points because outside of the Chicago game, and you got Minnesota after that, and then it's Toronto, New Jersey, who's been on a hell of a tear this year, Montreal, Minnesota again, and then back-to-backs against Calgary, and then the Lightning. Oh my gosh, I keep looking at this schedule going, where is there even a bit of a break? Wow. Oh, wow. All right, let's jump over and talk a little. Yeah, right. Let's talk a little NFL real quick. We've been going on for an hour and almost an hour and a half. It's what happens when you take a couple months off, right? We've been doing our pick'ems all year this year, and honestly, I think you and I have talked a little bit about this. We've actually done a lot better than I think we thought we were going to do so far this year with all the crazy games that have happened and all the results that have come about this year. Week 14, not so good for both of us. You were 5-8. I was 7-6. Gene Bonds from Gateway City Sports has been joining us the last 2 weeks. He was pretty good. He went 8-5 this week. But still, overall, we've done a pretty decent job of making picks this year, despite all the upsets.
Yeah, I'm impressed. I guess the key is you just guess because I still don't know who's good in the NFL, Wags. I still don't know. We're going into week 14. I don't know who's good.
I'm kind of there as well. I mean, you've got teams up at the top, but all those teams have lost to bad teams at some point this year as well. I mean, the Bills and Chiefs sitting at the top of the AFC, 10-3 apiece. They've lost a couple of games. The Ravens have been up and down. They've had injuries and all that stuff. The Titans 7-6. They actually might fall out, and you may see a team like Jacksonville possibly maybe rise up in that division and take it over. The Dolphins have been up and down as well. And then you look at the NFC, it's the Eagles up at the top, but that one loss to Washington kind of gets at you. The Vikings have been good, but have lost to a bad team here and there. You got the Bucs sitting at 6-7, leading the NFC South. There's that. But you got the NFC East, where pretty much everybody is in outside of let's see, nobody, because the Eagles sit up at the top, the Cowboys the next, Commanders and Giants are all there. Who would have thought the NFC East was going to be the cream of the crop in the NFC? But you also have a team like the Lions that are on the rise. You just don't know who's good in the NFL right now.
What if I told you, and this still very well could happen, if I would have told you when the season started that in the NFC, the Giants, the Commanders, and the Lions were all in the playoffs, you would have laughed at me, right? But they might be 3 of the best teams in the NFC.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bullish on the Lions this year. I thought they could do well. I picked them a couple games early on that didn't pan out, and now that I'm not picking them, they're winning. So maybe I'll keep picking against the Lions for all you Lions fans out there, however many of them there are. But yeah, they're going on a bit of a run, and you could very well see Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady not make the playoffs as well in the NFC, which, for all the turmoil that they've caused and all the success they've had in their careers, to see both of those guys out, and then to see not Jimmy G in the playoffs, but their backup quarterback who got his first career start and win last week, Brock Purdy. Is that what it is? Brock
That's
Purdy.
It.
He's leading the Niners to a 9-4 record. So you could see those guys all in the playoffs and not some of the legends. So before we go, I want to answer this quick question real quick. This is Anna. She's a new viewer, writes from St. Louis Game Time. Very, very good publication. We gotta get it out there about our favorite teams, and obviously we're both St. Louis natives, so Blues, Cardinals are big for us. But are there any other teams that you sit there, and we've talked about this in the past, and I know our fans probably know as well. But talk about some of the teams that you're a fan of but maybe have given you some heartbreak?
Football wise, I've been a lifelong Cowboy fan, which, I'm not proud to admit these days just because of things that go on in Dallas. But yeah, the Cowboys. I also like the Browns. So obviously I like to feel pain and suffer and be miserable during football season. Basketball wise, I've always been a Bulls fan. I've been a Knicks fan. Before LeBron, I was a Laker fan. I'm not now. I will be when LeBron is long gone. The Lakers will be a team that I enjoy watching. Turned into a little bit of a Grizzlies fan. Those would be my big ones. And then, Mizzou and SLU college-wise, I'm a huge fan of. And, I used to always be a Miami Hurricane football fan when I was younger, when they were still good. And I still enjoy watching the Canes. How about yourself, man?
Oh, for me, college-wise, it's, at least for college basketball, it's always been North Carolina. I mean, Michael Jordan, obviously that's why I'm a Bulls fan as well. Locally, yeah, SLU and Mizzou and Illinois. And for me, since I go there, I have gotten the support from Lindenwood as well. So another D1 school. So yeah, college is I've kind of spread myself out a little bit. So there's been a lot of really, really fun action for sure there. When it comes to the NBA, it's all Bulls all the time. Although just like you, I am starting to become a Grizzly fan because of Ja Morant. I think he's a very popular player and somebody that's really exciting and has helped me kind of get back into the NBA a little bit as well, because I kind of strayed away from that. NHL, obviously the Blues, big time fan of them. Cardinals in baseball, football in the NFL. Yeah, I'm a Chiefs fan. I do watch the Chiefs and enjoy them. I've become a very big Buffalo Bills fan as well. I think, just like you, I kind of like to experience some heartache because, the Blues have put me through a lot, and why not go with another team that has a primary color of blue giving you a bunch of heartache? And I went with the Bills as well. So yeah, kind of spread things out. Obviously not having a football team kind of sucks, but the Battlehawks are back. That did happen while we were gone. Cannot wait to see that team in action. And then as you see behind me, I've also got my City SC jersey as well. I've got a chance to pick that up. So big into that. So I'm a big Manchester United fan when it comes to soccer. And I know this is going to be sacrilegious because I live in the United States, but I'm a big Germany supporter when it comes to international football. And that's just because of my heritage. So, that's kind of where I'm at.
And by the way, I love the St. Louis SC jerseys. I really do. And I finally got a chance to go check out the stadium. I got to take a tour a couple of weeks ago, and that place is absolutely beautiful.
It is incredible. 120 feet separates every seat from the field, which is something almost unheard of. And yeah, to be able to be there for game days is going to be incredibly, incredibly exciting. We'll talk a little bit about the MLS here in just a second, but we got to get back to the NFL. So Anna, I hope that answers your question, and hopefully you become a regular viewer. We are very, very appreciative of everybody that takes the time out to listen to us and hear about all of our rants and raves because, it's sports talk. That's what you do. Let's get back to the football and to the NFL real quick, the playoff race. So running down, these are the seedings as of right now in the NFL after week 14. So AFC, you got Bills, Chiefs, Ravens, Titans, Bengals, Dolphins, and Patriots. Came away with the victory against Arizona last night. Still a couple teams that are kind of on the outside looking in that have a chance. The Jets and the Chargers both sitting at 7-6. For the NFC, Eagles, Vikings, Niners, Bucks, Cowboys, Commanders, Giants. Seahawks have an opportunity. The Panthers and Falcons sitting at 5-8 still have an outside chance of getting that NFC South berth. And then that Lions team we talked about has kind of been on the rise as well, but it's going to take it could take a big effort for them to sneak in there. One of these NFC East teams faltering, although Commanders and Giants play again this week, and after their 2020 tie last week, who's to say that they're not going to not tie again, right?
It really could. It really could. And how about the Commanders and the job that the former Battlehawk quarterback has done there? Because they definitely did not look like they were going to be a playoff team early in the season when the high-priced quarterback that they traded for didn't really work out again in another city.
What a shock. Yeah, are you talking about the former Eagles quarterback, right?
The former Eagles, Colts, soon-to-be former Commanders quarterback? Yeah, that guy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's almost like Washington's starting to turn into the Cleveland Browns with all the former quarterbacks that they have on their team.
You just need like 9 of them on your roster. You'll be fine.
Oh, man. But that defense, though, for Washington has been phenomenal the last couple of years. And that's been a big primary reason as to why they've been so good. And if you get anything from that offense, you're gonna succeed. And once again, that NFC East has been not good, but it's been the best football in the NFC this year. And, it's just, once again, you go back and you just don't know who is good, because anybody, it seems like, can beat anybody at this point. It's going to be a very, very fun stretch the last couple of weeks here to see where things kind of land. And really, if you look at it, I still think everything runs through either Buffalo or Kansas City. And I know that neither of those teams have been like, yes, this is who you think should be taking it. But with the way things have kind of panned out right now, if you're looking strictly at stadiums that are going to be played in, I think those two, with the weather conditions that both of them experience, I think that is going to be kind of the determining factor about who represents really the AFC in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think the one other team that you could throw in there that you got to watch out for, because they're getting hot at the right time of the year, just like they did last year, are the Bengals. And if you have to go play in Cincinnati, the weather can be nasty. In the jungle in Cincinnati can be a pretty scary environment to go in and try to beat that team. So all three of those teams, I think, are your favorite. A team that we didn't talk about in the AFC, and a team that before the season started, I said I thought we're going to win at least 7 games. Don't be shocked. Don't be shocked if the Jacksonville Jaguars somehow win the South.
I could see that. I mean, you look at it right now, Tennessee's on a 3-game losing streak, and Jacksonville just beat them as well. So they've got that going for them. And the Texans are already eliminated. Indianapolis is Indianapolis right now. Yeah. I mean, Jacksonville, at the very least, I feel like they can win 7 games like you said they were going to. I mean, they've got a tough matchup coming up on Sunday against the Cowboys, and then another tough game against the Jets, but then they finish off against the Texans. Should be a win, and then very possibly a division title game against the Titans to wrap things up. I mean, if you go 2-1 down the stretch here, that gives yourself a chance to sit at what 7-9.
Yeah.
So 2-1, 7-9. You kind of have to hope that the Titans lose a couple of games as well, and they're going up against the Chargers, which should be a tough game. But then they got the Texans. So once again, that's another possible win. And then you got Cowboys going into that. So you need the Titans essentially to lose all 3 games to give yourself a real shot. But if you go into that last week, essentially sitting 1 game behind them, you win that game, all of a sudden you're the champion of the NFC South and you're making the playoffs.
Right. And, both of those teams have to play the Cowboys. And the Cowboys should be good, but you never know from 1 week to another which Dallas team is going to show up. I mean, Dallas could beat you by 30, or they could lose to you by 30, because they're just that sporadic. You just never really know for sure what you're going to get from that team.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just look at, they lost to the Bucs to open the season, and they beat the Bengals early on. They've beaten the Rams, who now you're looking at that going, yeah, well, that makes sense. They beat the Lions pretty handily. They lost to the Packers, who are now out of the playoff push essentially. And then they've gone on a bit of a run now. I mean, they've won 3 straight. They beat the Giants. They beat the Colts handily. And then they struggled a bit against Houston this past week. They were down for a good portion of that game and eventually ended up winning by 4. But it's to your point exactly. You just never know what kind of Cowboys team you're going to get. And that's partially because you don't know what you're going to get out of Dak Prescott. You don't know what you're going to get out of Ezekiel Elliott, who, in my mind, and I hate saying this because he's a local product, but I think he's very well on his way out of Dallas, especially with what Tony Pollard's done the last couple of years, really. Zeke has become that second-hand running back in Dallas.
And you're right, he has for about the last year and a half. Although for about the last 3 weeks or so during this little run, Zeke started to find it again. And that's the missing cog for them. If they have that double running back, Pollard, who can break big runs, and then you have Zeke that can pound, and you just feed him, then they could be dangerous. And he has started to look like Zeke again the last couple of weeks after really a year and a half of just really, really struggling.
Yeah, thunder and lightning is what you need. You need the power and you need the speed, and you get that. And then if you got the outside threats at wide receiver, and really Dustin Schultz has done a good job at the tight end position as well. You don't have the high-end weapons that a team like Kansas City had and still kind of has, but you've got reliable weapons. And I think that's the thing. And I say reliable, and that's still a bit of a stretch because you got some wide receivers that drop some pretty easy passes. and you also need your quarterback to be able to make those accurate throws as well. So it's like you said, it's very tenuous about how Dallas can be. They're going to either be a team that can get into the playoffs and just go, or they're going to break your heart in the first round and lose epically.
Yep, pretty much. That's the way it's been in Dallas for the last 25 years.
Oh boy. You got to love it. You got to absolutely love it. And just, we were talking about Alex Ovechkin here with Alex Ferrario a couple of minutes ago. They're playing Chicago tonight. And wouldn't you know it, Alex Ovechkin has not one, but 2 goals already in the game tonight. And there's still 5:09 to go in the first period. So, maybe he heard us talk and decided, you know what, screw it. I'm going to break the record tonight. I'm going to score 98 goals tonight.
That's what it was. He knew we were talking about him, man, so he had to show up.
Hey, you know what? If Alex Ovechkin heard it from us, I would be beyond belief ecstatic, and I would be pretty much set with my life if Ovechkin knew that. So continue with the NFL talk. Kyler Murray last night goes down early in the game, torn ACL, out for the rest of the year, and a bit of a tough break. But you look at it and you go, I don't want to say it was destined to happen, but everything that kind of went around the Kyler Murray situation, his contract and playing video games and practicing and all that kind of stuff, everything that was going around him this year, it almost felt like maybe that an injury was kind of inevitable. Are the Cardinals in trouble?
Oh, well, the Cardinals were already in trouble. That was that. It's been a disaster there. Going back to DeAndre Hopkins getting suspended at the beginning of the season and everything with Kyler, like you said, and this put the death nail in Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff Kingsbury's career in Arizona is over, because you're not going to get not only is Kyler done for the rest of this year, you're not going to get him back, probably till week 10 or 11 of next year with that injury. So, Cliff Kingsbury's gone. It's going to be a retooling in Arizona. It'll be interesting to see what direction they go and, what do they do as a backup, because you have all that money invested in Kyler. It's not like you can go out and get another expensive quarterback. I mean, they're going to have a decent draft pick. Do you draft a quarterback high this year and bring him in as competition? Because, Kyler hasn't really delivered on all of the expectations that he's had since he got to Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like what Russell Wilson did when he came in with Seattle. I mean, he had a lot of question marks surrounding him. He had a bit of an injury question coming in as well, and his height. And he came out and just, boom, went. And you could see the talent level at the time with Russell Wilson that, you haven't necessarily seen with Kyler Murray. And he's had moments, don't get me wrong. He's definitely had moments, but hasn't really been able to pull together a good set of successive games where you go, okay, we're starting to see the trajectory go up and up and up and up. And, if you're Kyler Murray, you look at Russell Wilson right now and you go, I better get on my horse and do something good. Or I could be playing for the Broncos and being concussed just like that.
Well, and have you ever seen a quarterback who's gone from the heights of Russell Wilson a year and a half ago, where he was kind of the face of the league? Everybody in Seattle loved him. He was a guy, couldn't be a better. Everybody loves Russ. Russ is great. Russ is great. Russ is great. And then, you start hearing the rumblings about him wanting out of Seattle. And then he finally gets out of Seattle, goes to Denver. His play is horrible. And then everything you hear about Russell Wilson behind the scenes is he could not be a bigger douchebag, that his teammates all hate him, and guys in Seattle, I don't know if you've heard this, but guys in Seattle came out and said that they couldn't just call Russell Wilson and talk to him when they needed to talk to him. Marshawn came out and said this. Richard Sherman came out and said this. You couldn't call Russ and say, hey, we need to talk. You had to call his people, and his people would let you know when was a good time to talk to Russell Wilson. I mean, Russell Wilson, behind the scenes, definitely not the guy that everybody thought he was.
Oh, not at all. And, maybe he got caught up in the Hollywood lifestyle, getting married to Sierra and all of that. But yeah, it's definitely been interesting to say the least. I mean, he was one of my MVP picks last year when he was playing so well with Seattle, and then the bottom dropped out, and then going to Denver, and you can't sit there and say that it's all on Russell Wilson in Denver, because that team in Denver is terrible. I mean, they've got nothing going on. And I mean, if you're Drew Lock, you're like, I know I'm a bit injured here in Seattle, but I'll take this any day of the week than being in Denver right now. So, it is amazing how quickly his stock has fallen, and be very interested to see if retirement may be possible after this year. I know he signed a big extension to stay in Denver, but at some point you have to look at it and go, yeah, maybe I got to get out of this with the head injuries and all the stuff that's gone wrong. Maybe it's time to move on. You look at what Andrew Luck just kind of came out with this week or last week. Maybe the timing was not great, he said, but outside of that, the reasons he got out of the game were to prolong his memory, his life, and just to be healthy going forward. And, if you look at Russell Wilson, maybe you take your money and you cut your losses and you get out and spend time with your kids and your wife and maybe have a happy couple of years.
Yeah, although I think the money is more important to Russ. That was the big deal wanting out of Seattle, was that he wanted the big contract and wanted to be the guy. And so I think that in Sierra is the money and the fame is more important to him than the play and all the other stuff. So I don't think you see Russell Wilson going anywhere. But I mean, to see three guys who have been at the top of the quarterback food chain for so many years fall the way that Brady, Rodgers, and Russell Wilson have this year are crazy. And we were talking about San Francisco and their quarterback. Think about Tom Brady last week. Tom Brady lost by 4 touchdowns to the last pick in the NFL draft. Mr. Relevant beat Tom Brady by 4 touchdowns last week.
That's all you need to know about where the NFL is at right now, is that is exactly what happened. Mr. Irrelevant beat Mr. Brady or Mr. 6 rings or whatever he's got now. And yeah, it's incredible. And you look at the stock of quarterbacks now in the NFL. I mean, it's a different breed. I mean, you've got Mahomes, you've got, Josh Allen, you've got Joe Burrow. You've got a lot of these guys that are, I don't think I put Jalen Hurts up in that same category as those guys, although he can run and throw, but he's a guy that can maybe get there. But you're seeing that now. You're starting to see, I call them the Steve Youngs of this generation, and there's more of them. When Steve Young was around, it was him. Joe Montana kind of started things a little bit, and even he wasn't super mobile. But Steve Young, Warren Moon, those guys, they were special in their time frame. Exactly, Randall Cunningham. And now you're starting to see it being kind of the norm versus the exception. And these I wouldn't say dinosaurs, because a pocket passer is still a very good quarterback, because those things, accuracy and things like that, are important. So pocket quarterbacks aren't going to go away, but you are starting to see these younger, more mobile guys, and they're bigger and stronger too. I mean, the entire NFL is moving that direction, but to see these guys and the success that they've had, it really starts to make GMs think differently going forward. And yet not everybody's going to hit. Justin Fields is the perfect example. He's been okay, but for the pick that you used on him to not see the success that these other guys, it just shows you how much of a crapshoot it still is. When this style of quarterback is more prevalent, you still only have a handful of guys that are actually good at it.
Right. Yeah. As much as Fields has struggled, I mean, Zach Wilson right now is the bust of the draft last year. And real quickly, going back to Tom Brady, and I know Tom's had a rough year with everything that's gone on and off the field. And you look at Tom, and he doesn't even look like the same guy that he used to be. His face is sunk in. He just looks funny. And I had to bring this up because it's made me laugh every time I think about it. Somebody posted a GIF the other day and said, "It's been such a rough year. Tom Brady looks like somebody drew Kevin Bacon from memory."
I saw that too. And the crazy thing is, you look at it and you go, "Oh yeah, it kind of does. It really does." Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, you got a couple weeks left, 4 weeks left to go in the NFL season. Still plenty of changes that can happen in the playoff picture. Make sure you check in with our page every Sunday for our picks, including Gene's picks over there from Gateway City Sports as well. Been kind enough to join us at the end of the season, probably joining us again next year as well. So make sure you keep an eye out for those and let us know who you guys see coming out of each division and moving on in the playoffs when that time frame rolls around. A lot of different days being scheduled for games this week. You got one game on Thursday, 3 on Saturday, a handful on Sunday, and then the Monday Night Football game as well. So plenty of football action going on this weekend. All weekend, really. So make sure you check those out. Flipping over to other soccer. Football. This is soccer, though, that we're talking about. World Cup action, getting into the finals now. Argentina and Croatia played today. Argentina came away with a 3-0 victory. Lionel Messi had a goal and 2 assists. Tomorrow, France and Morocco play. Can the Frenchmen end the Moroccan run, or will Morocco be that first African team to make a World Cup final? We'll see tomorrow, and then final would be next weekend. And then the MLS Super Draft is coming up. That's going to be on December 21st. That's essentially the college draft for Major League Soccer. St. Louis City SC has the number 1 overall pick because they are the newest team in the league, so they'll be picking at 130 and 60 overall. Just a couple of names to throw out there for potentially the top pick. I know none of you guys have probably ever heard of these guys because soccer's still, ironically, not super big here, but it's big here. It's really, really weird. CJ Fadri, Dyson Clapier, Kalani Costa Renza, and Duncan McGuire all kind of jousting for that number 1 spot. It's going to be interesting, though, because City SC kind of has their rotation and their starting 9, starting 11. What am I trying to do here? Oh my gosh, starting 11 set. So really the super draft is really about, stocking the cupboard in a sense. So it's going to be real interesting to see who they pick. So make sure to check that out December 21st. They're going to have a watch party down at City Park. So if you get a chance to grab some tickets for that, head down there. It's a Wednesday afternoon, about 3:30 is when things will get underway there. And before that super draft, schedule should be coming out as well. Should be releasing the opening weekend games coming up in the next couple days, and then the full schedule should be out sometime next week probably after the World Cup final. So you're going to get a chance to see when City SC is going to be playing here in the next week and a half, which would be very, very cool to see and really start planning out some of these rivalry trips and seeing how things play out from there. So make sure you keep an eye out on that. We never like ending the show on a sad note, but definitely a bit of a shock the last couple of days, especially for those of you that are big college football fans. You're going to know the name Mike Leach very, very well. And even if you don't know the name, you know his offense like the back of your hand right now. The essential creator of the air raid offense passed away last night at the age of 61. Doctors are attributing it to a heart issue. Haven't really had a whole lot of news on that end come out, mainly for the respect of the family until things kind of get figured out. But the head coach at Mississippi State the last couple of years is also the head coach at Washington State and Texas Tech, where that air raid offense kind of came about. This guy turned around really 3 universities, football programs. I mean, Texas Tech never was under 500 when he was there. Washington State ended up rising out there in the Pac-12, and Mississippi State even this year finished up 8-4. They have got a bowl game against Illinois coming up, which they will be playing. But Mike Leach, man, an absolute genius of a coach and a pretty damn funny interview as well. If you never saw Mike Leach interview, you should definitely go look at the tributes that are out there because there's some pretty funny stuff that he's put out there. But Scott, what are your thoughts on Mike Leach as we mourn the loss of him?
Yeah, a heck of a football coach, man. And so innovative with that air raid offense. 4 of the top passing seasons in college football history, Mike Leach was the head coach of the quarterbacks with those records. I mean, he did some amazing things. He was a thorn in the side of Mizzou. He had that Texas Tech coming up during the Chase Daniel days at Mizzou. So there were some really good games between those 2 teams. And then, like you said, went on to Washington State and then Mississippi State. Just a really good coach, a funny guy. Like you said, he would make you laugh anytime you saw his press conferences or anything. I actually saw a clip today of him doing the weather when he was at Texas Tech. He jumped on one of the TV stations, was the weather reporter for a day. And that's pretty entertaining. Go back and you can catch that on YouTube, see some clips of Mike Leach. But yeah, he had some really fun things to say at the end of games during his press conferences and after games. And like I said, just an unbelievable unbelievable coach, a real innovator, and it's just really sad for anybody to pass away at 61, but especially a guy like that. You've best wishes to him and his family and friends and all of those things, and you hate to see that happen. But just a guy that's really going to be missed in college football circles for sure.
That he is, and I saw earlier today an excerpt from Gary Pinkel's book talking about Mike Leach in a sense and the respect level that he had for him, and the fact that Mizzou, when they it was during the Brad Smith days where they couldn't get anything going, and they were seeing this Texas Tech team being successful with the same kind of players and all that kind of stuff, and Pinkel essentially took what Leach was doing and integrated into the Mizzou offense, and that's what made them so successful into the Brad Smith, Chase Daniel days was what Mike Leach was doing at Texas Tech. So to see a guy of Gary Pinkel's pedigree as well, recognizing the genius of Mike Leach and integrating it into a rival in a sense in their system just shows you what he really meant to college football and the game of football in general. So once again, Mike Leach passing away at the age of 61. All right. Well, Scott, we've gone almost 2 hours in our first show back in a couple of months. I think we did a pretty damn good job, to be honest with you. We had Alex Ferrario on talking about the Blues, and we want to thank him for joining us again. The fact that he's doing, single father duties while his wife's working with 2 kids at home, and still had time to jump on and talk about the Blues and all of that. Huge thank you for him coming on, and hopefully we'll have him on again very, very soon. And hopefully we'll have some other big name guests coming back onto the show as we progress into the new year. We talked a lot about the Cardinals and Wilson Contreras and all the stuff that's going on in free agency. And once again, the NFL picks, make sure you keep an eye out for those every Sunday. We'll actually be releasing our Thursday and Saturday picks this week as well, so you'll be able to kind of keep track of those as the wild football weekend goes along. What else you got before we head out tonight, Scott?
Just think, man, 2 hours and we didn't even touch college basketball. So we'll have to get in. We'll have to get into that maybe next week as we get ready for the Mizzou-Illinois border war, which should be a heck of a game next Thursday.
Oh, that is going to be fun. I mean, the Mizzou-Kansas game that took place last weekend, the game itself wasn't great, but to see what was going on pregame down there at Mizzou, all the students and just the electricity that was down there to see the resumption of that Mizzou-Kansas rivalry, I can hopefully expect the same sort of excitement and electricity with Mizzou, Illinois, considering Illinois is kind of on the up and up, and Mizzou is kind of getting back into the course of rising a little bit. It's still going to take a year or two under Coach Gates to really get back to where we think Mizzou could be, but to be able to have another marquee matchup in the short span of 2 weeks is a good sign for Mizzou, and hopefully those fans will travel up here and we'll get to see a lot of electricity between those two teams for sure.
Oh, that place will be packed. That's one of the best sports events of the year is the Mizzou-Illinois border war. If you've never been there, I highly encourage you to go check it out because it is fun.
It from what I understand, it is too. I have yet to be there as well, so I got to get down there and check that out for sure. As you said, the Blues are on the road for 5 games before the holiday break. They'll be back after Christmas, so nobody going down to any Blues games anytime soon. Don't forget to get your tickets for the winter warm-up as well. I believe those are on sale now, and it's going to be fun because it's going to be down at Ballpark Village this year.
It is. It's going to be cold. It's going to be at Ballpark Village and the stadium. There's a bunch of events lined up in the ballpark itself. Tickets are on sale. Autograph tickets will be going on sale next week. So there'll be a list of who's going to be attending. I'm sure the newest Cardinal, Wilson Contreras, will be there, I'm sure, to make an appearance. And just think about this. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have an announcement. The newest Cardinal to be elected into the National Baseball Hall of Fame, potentially. As Scott Rowland's bid, we'll find out the results mid-January, about a week before the warm-up. And I think this is the year Scotty gets in. So hopefully we'll be able to honor Scott Rowland as latest inductee into the National Baseball Hall of Fame.
Oh, that would be awesome because he was one of my favorites. I wouldn't say growing up because I was about mid-teenager when he was here. So formative years. How about that? He was one of my favorite players in the formative years of my baseball love, Scott Rowland. So yeah, that'd be a lot of fun to see if he gets in. I hope he does as well. So we got plenty more sports talk coming up here in the next couple weeks. We'll be getting a schedule together of when we're going to be coming back on, so you guys can join us for every new edition of the Toasted Tavern. Once again, I want to thank Alex Ferrario for joining us. For Scott Tobben, I am Wags. Thank you guys for joining us. And if we don't see you before then, have a great holiday and a great new year. Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you later.
Hey, it's U-Man here from Casey. For all your sports news, catch the Toasted Tavern with Scott Tobben and the man called Wags, weeknights at 9 p.m. You can follow Toasted Tavern on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Let's get toasted.